In 30 minutes. He looked down at his watch. "Yes, Staff Sergeant," came the reply in chorus. His men scrambled to grab their remaining gear and move out as quickly as possible. Though Tim had struggled to stay warm enough to sleep, he knew these Marines were lucky that someone had studied the lessons of the First Korean War. With the temperatures dropping to sub-zero, the Marine commander had made the decision that units would only spend 2 nights on the front line before being pulled back for an evening of rest in heated tents. Once the air base had been secured, an engineering unit had quickly come in and made a space that was livable enough for the units who were pulled away from the front to have a place to rest before returning back to the battle a few kilometers away. As Tim stood in line to get breakfast, he spotted a few dozen Super Cobra attack helicopters. They must have gotten here while we were asleep, he thought. Seeing the helicopters so close to the front lines was comforting. We're going to have steady support with us for the coming offensive, he realized with a smile. He wondered if there was any truth to the rumor that the Air Force was going to move a squadron of Warthogs to the base once the front line moved further north and they could better protect the critical aircraft. A couple of Air Force C-17 cargo planes began to offload what looked like several companies' worth of soldiers. Looking closely at the uniforms, he noticed these were not American soldiers or Japanese. A smile spread across his face as he realized they were Australians. It was good to see the Aussies were getting in the fight. Tim had trained with the Australian Army in the past and knew them to be excellent soldiers. A mere 10 minutes later, Staff Sergeant Long had scarfed down a plate of creamed beef, grits, 4 strips of bacon, and a cup of piping hot coffee, and he felt like a human again. As he stood to walk out of the chow hall, Second Lieutenant Chet Cully caught up to him. "Staff Sergeant Long, hold up a second." "What can I do for you this fine morning, sir?" Long asked cheerfully, hoping he hadn't just had his last warm meal for a while. Cully had been their platoon leader for the past 8 months. He was a pretty decent officer and liked by the men thus far. His brother was currently a captain with the 3rd Marines, not too far away from there, and his father was a Marine brigadier general back at Camp Pendleton. "Staff Sergeant Long, we're going to start pulling out for the front in about an hour. I wanted to go over our primary objectives with you and also pass along some good news." He pulled out a folded map and placed it on the hood of their joint light tactical vehicle. "First, I want to let you know the Master Gunnery Sergeant Nopal is going to make it. I spoke with the battalion surgeon, and he said Nopal may still lose his leg, but he'll live," Lieutenant Cully announced with obvious relief on his face. Master Gunnery Sergeant Nopal had served with Cully's father many years ago and had taken him under his wing when he was assigned to the company as the 3rd platoon leader. Nopal was also well liked by everyone and respected for his off-duty work with the Toys for Tots program. Smiling, Staff Sergeant Long responded, "That is great news, sir. I'll make sure to pass that on to the rest of the guys. Have you heard anything about Captain Millett or Lieutenant Patel?" He hoped their company commander and XO were also okay. Just before they had been pulled off the line, an RPG had hit their vehicle, injuring everyone inside. So far, their fellow Marines had received no updates about the extent of their wounds. Lieutenant Cully's face darkened, and he suddenly looked like he had aged a few years. "Unfortunately, neither of them made it. I don't know how bad their injuries were or why they didn't survive. The battalion surgeon only told me they were in pretty bad shape when they were medevaced out." The 2 men stood there in silence for a moment as they reflected on the loss. They had experienced so much grief since the start of this war, and not just here in Korea, but they also had friends that had died fighting in Europe, and so many had perished in California. Finally, Staff Sergeant Long nodded. "I'm sorry, sir. I know Captain Millett had become one of your first friends here." He put his hand on Lieutenant Cully's shoulder. Cully wiped a tear from his eye. "You're right, Staff Sergeant. Unfortunately, they probably won't be the last friends I lose today, or before this war is over. But enough of that. The battalion commander told me I'm going to be taking over as the company commander. He didn't have any captain bars to give me this morning, but assured me I'll have them before the end of the day." He also told me I had to